listening to the AFTERBUZZ TV Network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Keith. Johnson.
From the AFTERBUZZ Studios in Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies, this is AFTERBUZZ TV's After Show.
Hello, AfterBuzzers, and welcome to the After Show for The Knick. This is our very first episode, the pilot called Method and Madness. My name is Oriana Leo, hosting your show tonight. Marissa Serafini and Matt Lieberman are not with us, but in their honor, we have a very special guest, Anna Koppel. She's filling in.
I don't think I'm the special guest.
Well, you're our special guest host. But even more exciting, we have an amazingly special guest in studio. We have Michael Begler. Say hello to the fans.
Hello, fans.
Now, Michael is part of the two-team duo responsible for co-creating, co-writing, and executive producing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, yeah, exactly. We are honored to have you here. So we're going to have your partner, Jack Amiel, calling in from DC in just a few minutes. But before then, let's kind of jump in. Anna, what did you think when you saw this pilot episode for the very first time?
I thought it was pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was such a great pilot, and especially for Cinemax, I think it's such a great turn for the network. But man, we were sort of talking off camera that I think Michael said the first 7 minutes you don't breathe, and I think that's accurate. And especially with like, and we'll get into all of the details, but,
yes.
But particularly with the cesarean, I was like literally hugging myself, just like,
yes,
it's gonna happen.
The intensity of the show, I feel like, is at an 11 from the very moment that it starts, and it really doesn't let up. And when it does, I feel like it's like lulling you into a sense of security.
False security.
Yeah, false security.
Yeah.
Michael, how would you say that seems accurate? What were you going for in the mood?
I think that's what we were going for. I think we were going for that intensity, but also those places where you could breathe, where you could exhale.
Yes.
That's why I think we put a little bit of that humor in the show. Like when you see, for example, when you see Tom Cleary, the ambulance driver, and he brings out the baseball bat.
Yes.
It's like, it's those moments where you can just be like, okay, I can relax a little bit but then it's going to ramp back up.
Right. There's a little bit of levity there to give you the break from some of the insane surgical scenes that we see. But start opening up the shot, we see Dr. Thackery's white shoes in an opium den. Not that we put that together right away, but he essentially, in the very first scene, travels from the opium den, shoots up, and does the equivalent of scrubbing in for a surgery. I did a little bit of research, and I know Anna did too, that thinking this show couldn't just exist out of nowhere. There has to have been historical reference, obviously, but for the main character.
Right.
So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what sort of research you guys did, what informed and inspired this character, clearly based on the actual badass surgical doctor, William Stewart Halstead.
Yeah, well, it started, I mean, the whole idea, if you want to just go back to where the show was originally conceived, I was going through a little bit of a health issue a couple of years ago, and I was kind of going down the road of different treatments, traditional medicine and alternative medicine, and there were times where I was really amazed at what medical science had figured out, and other points I was really frustrated at what they still didn't know.
Sure.
So it just made Jack and I think about the general idea of why do we know anything at any given time, and how would I have done this 100 years ago? Like, what options would I have had? So just on a whim, we decided to buy a couple of medical textbooks off of eBay from 1900, and they were unbelievable. Like, we couldn't put them down. It was like reading 50 Shades of Grey to us. I mean, like, we literally, it was like we were turning the pages, we were emailing and texting each other saying like, oh my God, you're not going to believe what I just found. So we knew right then that there was something really incredible to play here. And then as we dove into the world and into the actual surgeons, we came across William Halstead, and he was one of the founders of Johns Hopkins, and he's considered during that era like one of the most groundbreaking surgeons of his time. However, he was also a massive cocaine and morphine, thank you, addict. So he was coking up during the day. He was making all of these incredible discoveries, and then to come down, he would shoot up the morphine. And we just thought that there was just something amazing in a character like that back in 1900. Yes, we've seen the drug-addled doctor in someone like House, but I mean, to be quite honest, Jack and I had never seen House, but we just felt like there was just an incredible world, and this guy there was just so much to play with him.
There absolutely is. Go ahead, Ellen.
Yeah, well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he became a cocaine addict by testing himself and his interns, right?
Yeah, they didn't have anybody to test on, so it was just something that they would do in the medical schools, and they would just basically say like, okay, here's leukococaine. I want you to see what it does. So we're all going to inject it into our arms. I want you to feel the sensation. So after a while, you're doing that class after class, and you're also seeing like, wait a minute, it gives me a sort of a rush. It gives me euphoria, and so why not use it? They didn't know that it was dangerous at the time.
Sure.
Actually, the Austrian army was giving it to their soldiers because it just made them superhuman.
Right. And also, I mean, part of that work, as much as it led to his addiction, was groundbreaking in, I guess, ether and numbing procedures for surgery.
Oh yeah, there's a number of procedures that he perfected. I think one of the things that he's most well known for is like something that's so routine today is a hernia operation. There's a very specific hernia operation that nobody could figure out, and he was the one who sort of revolutionized that.
Right.
And again, it seems like, what's the big deal about hernia? But back then, it was seen as something that was going to change the medical world.
I was looking at some of the things that he has been credited in doing, and they were a long list, such as the first gallbladder operation, which he did on his own mother on a kitchen table
in her house. Yeah.
In her home. He performed the first blood transfusion on his sister, and then performed a surgery on her afterwards. Experimented with cocaine as an anesthetic. He, what I thought was interesting is that he entered a sanitarium for treatment of his addiction, in which they used morphine to treat his cocaine addiction.
Yeah.
And so he left with 2 addictions. That was well before he went on to found essentially Johns Hopkins.
Right.
So he was a prolific junkie in the sense that he was so functional on such an incredible level.
Yeah. Yeah, it seemed there was nothing that he and some of his colleagues could do at that point. There was also Osler, who was another one of the founders, and there was Franklin Mall. I mean, all these guys at the time were making such inroads, and so we don't want to say that Thackery is just Halstead. He's actually all of these guys, and it's just kind of amalgamated into one person. It was the things that they accomplished in a very, very short amount of time too. We're talking about a span of like 10 years. It blew people's minds. I mean, everything was moving at such an incredible rate. We think everything goes so fast now. Like we go, oh my God, I can't keep up with technology. But back then, okay, you got to remember, like outside of medicine, you had the automobile that was invented, the telephone, the movie camera, the wax recorder, the phonograph. So people's minds were being blown. The airplane was only a couple of years away, and they were being blown like on a daily basis. I mean, there's so much happening so fast. Like people had really bad anxiety.
Right. So we see this this surgical gallery with the mentor, which is Dr.
Christensen.
Thank you, Dr. J.M. Christensen, with his mentee, Dr. Thackery, and they are going to perform looks like they're going to perform a C-section. Because their mother has placenta previa, and it doesn't go according to plan. I know that I was viscerally affected by this scene. Right. They wheel in the mom, and she says, "Just save my baby," and the 2 men look at each other and say 100 seconds, and they're in a room. This must have been standard for teaching hospitals.
This was the way it was done. They were called theaters. You were literally performing, and the way it worked was you had a gallery of doctors. The most senior professors and doctors were on the bottom row, and the top were the young students and the interns. And it was just that. You came out there, you said, this is what I'm going to do, and you attempted it, and sometimes it worked, but most of the time it failed. And it was teaching.
I feel like we get to see a little bit into Dr. Christensen, you know, he seems like he's very intent on the procedure that he's planned, that he wants to do. And Dr. Thackery is the one that's kind of stating, like, this baby has moved, this is perforated, like, things are not set up for a perfect operation here. They're going to have to change course. And you can kind of see Dr. Christensen pause for a moment, and they really don't have a moment to spare.
No.
Anna, how are you feeling in this moment?
Well, I don't. There's not a second to pause, and but I also, with Dr. Christensen, you know that he's so emotionally invested in this, and it's and we know because later he kills himself, but that there's so much at stake here. It's not just this woman's life. It's not just the life of this baby. It's also this man has so much tied to it, and you know, there's, with everybody watching, you know, all eyes on it, there's just so much.
There couldn't be any more pressure.
Yeah, so.
And we find out later that in what, I'm not sure if it's a flashback or a hallucination, but when the mentor is speaking to the mentee saying, you know, I'm after fame. You know, there was no denying that they wanted to be remembered and written down in the history books and the textbooks for advancing surgical, you know, knowledge and practices and gains. But you can see how much pressure he ended up being under.
Yeah, and remember, these guys the pressure they're under, they bolster themselves by shooting up. So they can walk in there fully confident about what they're going to do. And I don't think I'm giving anything away by saying that there's a line in episode 2 where Thackery is talking to Christensen's widow, where she asks, like, how do you deal with this? And he says, you know, and she said, what happened to my husband? How come he cracked, essentially? And he says to her, he stopped seeing the procedure and he started seeing the patient. So because he had failed at this over and over and over again, it just got under his skin, and he couldn't take it anymore. And so the reason that these guys like Thackery are shooting up is that so they can just focus on the task and not see the woman who says, please save my baby.
Right. So we know what happens. We know that the surgery does not go well. There's a really grotesque shot of the belly with the clamps in it as they all, like, depart. And I just was thinking, like, this is so real. This is so realistic. I can't believe we came from this.
So much blood. So much blood.
So much blood.
What were those?
The intensity of the pumping of the blood as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The cinematography is really remarkable.
Cinematography, the visual effects guys, the prosthetics, like, all of it was, I mean, we shot that. There's nothing that is digitally enhanced in that scene. That is all practical.
Wow.
I mean, we had the blood. Those guys, the VFX guys, they had the blood pumping underneath the table the whole time. I mean, that was theater in itself, just watching them perform this whole thing. And I mean, it was so incredible. I mean, Steven must have done 36 setups, I think, for that one surgery. And you know, Steven holds the camera. He's the cinematographer, and there's a B camera operator. But that took a good chunk of a day. But at the end of it, I mean, it was spontaneous. But the guys in the gallery, all the extras, they got up and applauded. Like, it was because it was so it was so intense. Like, you really believe these guys were in there doing the surgery.
Yeah, well, and like you just brought up with the pumping, and that definitely added the like squeaking of it, and they're like, pump faster, and it's just like,
and you can see you can see that the pulley is you know, it's overworked, it's about, and it just gave so much more emotion to the scene. And then, you know, we are obviously disappointed, the pulse is gone, and we follow Dr. Christensen to his office, where he very politely puts a sheet down to make his own deathbed, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's that. But we move into that sort of funeral scene where Dr. Thackery is on the soapbox, if you will. I mean, he's a great orator, and you could tell he's very passionate. And he says exactly what you just shared with us about our society is making so much progress. We can't let something like this slow us down. But I don't know if it's foreshadowing. I just see that this is definitely an interesting part of his character, that it's like progress against all odds. You know, he seems like he really truly believes that what he's doing is for the betterment of humankind, no matter how many bodies are at the bottom of the pile.
Right. I mean, he's got a body count behind him of hundreds. These guys all did, but they they weren't going to let things slow them down. I mean, they felt it was a responsibility that they needed that body count in order, because every body that they kill, they learn from, and so then they apply what they learned. But again, for Christensen, it got to be too much.
We see that, going into the hospital itself and the way that this world develops, this hospital has benefactors, the Robertsons, correct? Can you explain, how did you guys do research or come to understand what that world looked like? Was that specific to the Knickerbocker?
Well, there were two types of hospitals in New York. There's public hospitals and there were private hospitals. And we're kind of saying that ours is a private one. It's funded by, we say they get some money from the church, but they also have all these benefactors. And so they make all the decisions. They can decide who comes in those doors. They can decide how much they want to charge somebody. If you're in a public hospital, like at the time, like Bellevue was around, and they have to let everybody in the door. It's just because they're being funded by the city, and but a place like the Knickerbocker, they can open or close their doors to anyone they want, and they can make the rules that they want.
Right.
So someone like the Robertsons can decide who they want as the replacement, because they have the power to do that. Right.
And we were talking a little bit before we went on air about what that world looks like, in the sense, I think it's interesting that Cornelia, the daughter, she's the one with the guts. She's the one that has been put in a position by her father to essentially run the hospital as they see fit.
Right.
But she has a very unique situation of being the daughter, being a woman, trying to bring on an African-American doctor that is clearly not wanted. Were these historically accurate in the sense that they were actually referring to things that happened?
They weren't referring to specific things, but in general, just what was going on in the world. I mean, sort of our mantra, Jack and I, our mantra when we wrote this thing was to tell the truth. We didn't want to sugarcoat any of this stuff, because it's just the world we lived in, and like it or not. And so we felt it was a really racist, sexist society back then. It was the world of the white Protestant man, and they just controlled everything in the country. And in America at the time, it was it was going to be our century. In the 19th century was Europe's century, but the 20th century was going to be the American century, and these guys were going to take it and just run with it. And so they weren't going to have anybody stand in their way. And we're talking about, we're 35 years past emancipation. So it's still, to be a black man in America is still such a struggle and strain, even if you are as talented and as well educated as our character Algernon Edwards. He could, if you don't mind a little bit of history.
Sure.
The first black medical student at Harvard was accepted in 1850, and his name was Martin Delaney. And he and two other African Americans were accepted into the class, and they only lasted 3 weeks, because the other students, they just put up a petition. And Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., who is the father of the future Supreme Court Justice, was the head of the school, and he agreed, and he kicked them out. And it was a couple decades later before another African American was accepted to Harvard.
Wow.
But on the flip side of that, what we have in the show is that Algernon got a lot of training in Europe, and that is absolutely true. These guys could go to Europe, they could work with the best doctors, the best researchers, the best scientists over there as an equal. We use this archivist and medical expert. His name was Dr. Stanley Burns, and he was so incredibly helpful. And he has this brownstone in New York that literally has over 1 million photographs from the era. It's insane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He's a very, very, very specific hoarder. But so the first photograph he showed us was of an African-American surgeon in Paris at the turn of the century, being the lead surgeon on a surgery, and everybody else around him is white, but he's the lead surgeon. And it's the only photograph that exists of this, from this era of that event. So yeah, it was really, really tough for African Americans. And then for women, we're what, 20 some odd years away from women even having the right to vote.
Right.
Women there weren't any positions for them. I mean, yes, a sweatshop, a nurse, maybe you were a shopkeeper, but there were no positions of power really for women. There were a couple of exceptions, but in general, that wasn't heard of.
Or in this case, if your family was wealthy enough.
Right.
With Cornelia.
Would that be the exception, wealth?
I think so, yeah. Definitely that has a big part in it, because the captain has the power to say what he wants to say, and he's the chairman of the board, and so he can say she's going to sit in as my proxy, and they have to go along with it. But she still doesn't get the respect that everybody's condescending,
sure,
patronizing.
Especially to Nurse Lucy has that moment where Dr. Thackery just eviscerates her.
Right.
I mean, yes, she didn't properly check the tubes or whatever on that patient that had the abdominal surgery, but I could feel how just mortifying that would be. Yeah,
and which was the whole point. I mean, here's a girl who's 3 weeks into working at this hospital. She's from West Virginia. She's from a small town, and here she is in the big city. She's got the big job, and she's just beaten down right away. Right. And that it's just got to be, it's got to be mortifying, demoralizing. But I think that was just the way it was.
Also, what I think is interesting too is that we have this benefactor for the quote unquote, private hospital, but we see behind the scenes that there really isn't a lot of money.
No.
And they have to pay to get bodies in the hospital, living bodies, but they also want to have cadavers. Like, I'm trying to understand, where is the money going, or why is there this situation?
Well, the reason the hospital doesn't have a lot of money is because it's downtown, and the city was really changing historically back in 1900. I think there was about 1.5 million people in New York in 1900, but in that year alone, 500,000 immigrants came in. So you increase the size of the city by a third, and all of them, or almost all of them, are living downtown. They're living on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. So you have this influx of people. So then you have this flight of the wealthy moving uptown. Right. They don't want to be around it. So the type of person, or the type of patient at the hospital is going to go from a middle class or upper class person to these lower class immigrants, and they can't really pay that much. And the truth of the matter is, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling about history a little bit.
Oh no, it's amazing.
Is that back then, the middle class didn't want to go to the hospital because, well, first of all, going to the hospital was considered, you're probably going to die if you had to go to the hospital.
As we can see.
Yeah, it's not
a safe place.
No, it's not a happy place, though it looks beautiful. But the middle class didn't want to go because they couldn't afford the rooms, the private rooms, but they didn't want to be on the ward with the immigrants. So they said, all right, we're just going to stay home. So, and if all of the wealthy are now going to the uptown hospitals, all you have for the most part are these immigrants. So it's like, we've got to bring in as many bodies as we can, any way we can. Now we the idea of Cleary going out and snatching up these bodies, we made that up because we just thought it was just too great, because again, we just made it up out of their situation, which was really, that was based on fact that these hospitals downtown were struggling because of this great move uptown. So
when the health inspector goes out and goes into these kind of slums, which exactly you're explaining, of all these new immigrants coming in, there's not enough airflow. The conditions are really bad, and they're perfect for the proliferation of disease.
Right.
Was that something that you saw historically, that there would be these health inspectors, were they getting kickbacks? Not that there's that much difference from the medical industry today. We know there's a whole lot of greasing, certain relationships to make sure that patients have a certain flow. No, this was also another thing that was historically based on fact, that the health inspectors had a bit of power in New York, that they would have to go into these tenements and into these areas if diseases broke out, and they could quarantine full blocks if they wanted to, and by doing that, they could also sort of decide which areas get quarantined, so which hospital is in that neighborhood, so who's going to get the patients. And if the health inspector, if the city says, okay, we have to quarantine and we have to bring these people to the hospital, the city is going to pay for each patient. So you
the Knick almost wants this influx of tuberculosis patients because it just means more money in their pocket. And Spate, just being an opportunist, like so many people on our show, he just figures like, hey, I give you something, you give me something in return.
Right. And he's not that unlikable.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
seems like, I kind of like his character. I see what he's doing, but I'm like, I don't know who wouldn't at that time do the exact same thing.
Right. And I think it's also the way that the actor, David Fierro, plays it. He just has this sort of, I mean, I think he looks the period. Like, he honestly looks
sure
like
does.
he's from the period, and he just kind of plays it with a little bit of humor, which I think is, and lightness, which is great, and I think that's why it makes him, I think, a little likable.
The characters talk about the circus many times. I know Dr. Thackery says to Dr. Algernon Edwards. Algernon, thank you. But he says, this is not London or Paris.
Right.
I don't want you in my circus.
Right.
Is that reference to circus? Where did that come from?
I'll credit my partner Jack with
Which
that
I'm
one.
sorry we don't have him on the air. Something must have happened, but we're glad we have you.
I think it's just when we look at that world and how insane it is, and that it is a circus, that it and that Thackery has to be the ringleader. He has so much going. He's got 3 rings going on at once. He's got a surgery here. He's got to be on the ward here, and it's just, he's trying to keep all those balls in the air. And it's performance, it's insanity, it's death-defying. I mean, it's all these things that you would find in a circus, and I think that's why Jack kind of came up with that analogy, which is a great one.
And we see that, he can't even take a night off from his regularly scheduled activities.
No.
Right? That throws in a whole nother level of circus-ness, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, it's like these guys, they're going all day, but they got to come down at a certain point in the night, and they've got to find that release. So his release is with opium, but there comes a point where he says, like, I've got to stop all of it.
He's trapped.
Yeah.
He's very much trapped. You can feel for him in that moment of, I'm still on episode 1, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can really feel for him in that moment of vulnerability that he's clearly having withdrawals.
Right.
And Lucy is there to help.
Yeah.
As much as she can. But it's remarkable to me to think that could possibly have been based on historical fact. Like, that there was a man that could have been that sick and then be performing a surgery shortly thereafter.
There are a lot of functional addicts in the world.
There sure are.
That every day go and spend years, decades even. So,
But not usually so prolific.
Sure.
But still pretty amazing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Algernon Edwards and just his struggle at the circus. His reason for wanting to stay, I don't know, Anna, how do you feel about this? It seems like it's a little bit of pride, and it's a little bit of him also being the ultimate student, where he really wants to learn from Dr. Thackery. He also doesn't want to give in, maybe? What did you get from that?
Yeah, no, I definitely got that sense. I don't know. I have some question. I would like to see his character. I've only seen the pilot, of course. So, like right now, I love what is his Andre Holland? Yeah. I love the way he's playing him. Like he just seems like so gentle and stoic, and there's just like a real sort of calm confidence about him.
Yes.
However, I would like to see some edginess about him, because to just be like, the good black guy who everybody else is picking on is just, I don't know, and don't give anything away. But
all I'll say is we felt the same way.
Okay.
We didn't want that either. We felt like that it's not 3-dimensional, and that this guy, again, I'm not going to give anything away, but he's not, everything you saw in the pilot is not even close to what is not the full picture. And you've now seen episode 2.
I have seen, there is an edge that comes out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
He's definitely human. But the things that he has to go through, and I can't, like you were saying, I can't imagine the difficulty of being that man, and being able to travel overseas and be treated in a completely different manner, and gain all of this knowledge and experience, and yet be suffocated and stifled.
Yeah.
What that would feel like. I
Right.
think, you know, props to you to you guys for making such a sympathetic character, but who ultimately does reveal himself as more complicated.
Yeah, there's actually an athlete, this cyclist named Major Taylor, who was one of the biggest. Cycling back then was like one of the biggest sports in 1900, and he was African American. He was, I mean, again, sorry, Jack, that you're not on this because you could talk more about this. So if I get it wrong, you can text me later. But I believe that he was raised in a white household. I think like I don't know the exact details. I can't remember them. But point being that he was this incredible cyclist. And he would go over to Europe and he was treated like a king. Everyone wanted to race him. Everyone wanted to come and see him race. He would go over to Australia, same thing. Come back to America, he was kicked. He was spit on the track. They would try and throw him off his bike, and he got absolutely no respect. And so that's almost like I think we probably talked about that, but that was sort of like what I think we both had in the back of our minds for this guy. It's just like that was just the reality. But yeah, there's also a little bit, you know, of I like to think of Jackie Robinson in that when Jackie Robinson was asked to join the majors, Branch Rickey said to him, you basically, for 5 years, you can't say anything. Like, you just have to keep your head down and play baseball and not get angry, because if you get angry, you're gonna ruin your chances. And it was like so much for this one guy to swallow all the abuse. It's like nobody could handle all of that. So again, it's like that as well played into the forming of Algernon. And yeah, I guess that's the long answer to say, like, yeah, it's coming.
Okay. I think we kind of need to wrap up. We're going to move into like our news and predictions and all that kind of stuff. But did you have any other thoughts? I had a couple of notes on Dr. Thackery. Anything for you? You
know, I just the one thing I wanted to with Dr. Thackery, I really just loved the closing moment where everything's been agreed upon. Dr. Algernon's staying, and so the electricity's staying. But as he's walking out of the building, the lights are literally staying on. But he has sort of, I don't know, I felt it was like symbolic for him illuminating the place. So I just thought that was really sort of brilliant.
Yeah, very poetic.
Yeah.
There were a couple sort of poetic moments I noticed with Dr. Thackery when he talks about he's doing that epidural for the first time, essentially. And he says, oh, this has never been done on anyone before. Or he says, only tried once before on a laboratory retriever.
Right.
And they said, well, what happened? Not a day goes by that I don't miss that dog. His sense of humor, right in the middle of it, while this patient is dying, yes, but I mean, there's a gallery, and it doesn't seem to faze him at all.
No.
That this could easily kill this guy, just like it killed his dog, and make a joke out of it.
Right. And again, it's just that he has to have that sort of sense of humor about the whole endeavor, because he knows that, the chances of this working, he has no idea. He came up with this on the way in. Lucy shoots him up, and he basically from his place to the hospital, he's like, oh, you know what? Why don't we just try giving this guy a cocaine injection into his back? And so it's like he has no idea, and so it's just like, all right.
It's a remarkable period in history. I'm so excited to see how the rest of the season's going to unfold, because these characters, and Clive Owen, and of course, amazing performance. The issues that these characters are going through, like you said, are completely. They're just unbelievable to us now, as far as the amount of progress that's being made and the type of pioneering attitude you have to be a part of it at this time. So a lot of exciting stuff. One thing I wanted to touch base with you was the music, because I think that the music is so different. It's a juxtaposition. Can you explain that to us?
Well, that's all Soderbergh. I mean, he saw that from a very early point, that the whole thing about the show in general is we all felt we wanted it to have a very modern feel. We didn't, you watch a lot of period things, and there's almost like an invisible wall that's put up. You know, it's very staid. It feels very proper. It's very romanticized, but the whole point of this was to make you feel like you're there, like you can relate to these people. So the way they speak, we really worked on the language to make it not so like old-timey, you know.
Right.
We really wanted
It's
to
very
feel
accessible.
Right, accessible.
But not false.
Right, exactly. We didn't want to make it too contemporary. They're not saying dude or, you know, anything like that. But we wanted it to feel like it could be today in terms of, so you didn't have to spend any energy sort of processing that. And so another piece of that is to keep it modern was to make the music as contemporary as possible. You know, Steven knew right away, like when he was going to shoot it, he said no strings. He doesn't want violins. He doesn't want anything acoustic. He wants it just to have this sort of pumping feel. And he's worked with Cliff Martinez before. You know, I think they did Contagion together, and they did a couple other movies together. So he just is very familiar with what he's able to do, and it just adds a level of intensity to it. And I'll just add one more thing that I love about it is where he uses it, because he uses it in places like Thackery's Drive to the Thing, and it really gets you going.
Yes.
Yeah.
But once you're in that surgery, there's no music.
Right.
And I love that, because then you concentrate on the pumping of the blood and all the sounds of the cutting and all of that. It just enhances that even more and makes that even more intense.
I completely agree, and I feel like you did a great job blending our worlds. That we could be sucked into this, but I've seen a couple other period productions that are on like Netflix and Hulu, and I just don't believe it. It's comedic almost, not on purpose, because it's too far away. It's too detached. So I think you guys have done really incredible work.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts before we get into news and gossip?
Let's get into news and
All
gossip.
right, let's do some news and gossip.
AfterBuzz TV News.
So, Michael, this is the part where we talk about news. I was wondering if you might have any news for us about a second season. Has anything come up?
Well, we've been renewed.
You have been renewed.
Yes,
Thank you
we've been renewed
for sharing.
And so we are actually in the middle of writing the scripts. We know exactly what we're doing. We know exactly where it's going to go.
So, I know.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the first season is a very wild ride. The second season is an even more wild ride.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, that's a huge deal, especially this happened before even the pilot aired.
Yes, it happened. It happened at the TCAs. You know, I just think that everybody involved sees something special here. I'm really glad that they do.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
And so they just believe in it. And the other thing is that Steven's going to do all 10 again. He's going to direct all 10 episodes of second season. So I think that is a major thing. You know, Clive's obviously in for a second season, so that's a major coup. So all of that makes them say like, well, I guess why not do it again? And again, I'm incredibly grateful that they are going to do it again.
We are grateful too, and bravo to Cinemax for bringing us this kind of programming, because it's so unique.
Yeah. I think, you know, my hat's off to Carrie Antholis and the team at HBO, Richard Plepler, Mike Lombardo, and David Levine. They saw what we saw right away, and they let us do it. They really, I mean, we were under an incredible time crunch. Last June we had one script, and now we had 3 months to write 9 more.
Wow.
So I am so incredibly grateful that they gave us that opportunity. They are incredible collaborators, very, very smart executives, and I think all of our work comes out on the screen.
It sure does. Yeah, we get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Anything on out from you for news and gossip?
I don't have news.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We did a lot of research on the doctor, but we already covered that. So let's get into predictions. We're going to get into predictions right now.
All right.
So Anna, do you have any predictions?
I predict, you know, I saw a little flirting between, there it is.
Oh, there it is.
There we go.
Better late than never.
AfterBuzz TV.
I saw a little, maybe a little spark between Lucy and Dr.
Chickering.
Thank you. And So I'm going to say that there's going to be a romance there. Yeah, I'll stick with that to be my prediction.
I've already seen the second episode, so I'm not really sure that it's fair to predict. But season long, I'm expecting to see more cutting edge at the time surgeries that I have to avert my eyes from. And I imagine that we're going to see the development of Dr. Algernon Edwards, his character, his edges, the complexity of the situation he's in. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dr. Thackery has a bit of a downward spiral. He's already in a spiral, but it seems like it might be going down and up every single episode. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
Would you like to make a prediction? Your guess, I don't know. Maybe about anything, about the success, about how well it's been received, anything?
I predict there will be more blood on
right.
the show. There will be stories that involve doctors and nurses. And that's about all I'll say.
Okay.
And there will be horses.
Ooh, horses. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I wondered about that shot, that there was like a specific, I'm like, that's there for a reason. So.
Oh, wait, the dead horse in the
Yes,
beginning?
yes.
Well, it was, the horse was there. It's actually based on a famous photograph of these kids who are sitting in the gutter, like literally next to a dead horse. And so we just said, like, well, we've got to have that.
The reality of living in New York at the turn of the century.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much, AfterBuzzers, for watching and joining us on our wrap-up of the pilot episode for The Knick. And thank you so much to our special guest, Michael.
Thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Sorry, Jack. We couldn't
get a hold of you. We're going to have to do it another time. At the end of our episode, we like to tell everyone where they can find us at home. So do you remember your Twitter handle so you could share that?
Yeah, it's at Michael Begler.
All right. And Anna, tell everyone where they can find you.
You can follow me at Koppel for Mayor, KOPPELFORMAYOR.
Awesome. And I'm Oriana Leo. You can find me on Twitter at Miss Oriana Leo, Instagram Oriana Leo. Just type it in, you'll find something. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back next week with episode 2.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Thank you for watching AfterBuzz TV on YouTube. For more of your favorite after shows and interviews, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion on the episode in the comment section below here. We'd love to see what you guys are buzzing about. Thanks again. Buzz you later.